This is my first daytime interview.
Do you normally do them at night?
Yeah, well, I've got a PR team in the States. They're the ones who reached out to you. And so they're mostly lining things up with US-based people. So I usually do it about 8 p.m. Yeah, so that's after a glass of wine. So bottoms up. I poured myself a glass of vodka and we'll see how it goes.
I was gonna say, how do you like at the end of a day doing an interview must be quite like I don't know, it must take a lot more for me anyways. Like by 6 o'clock after a busy day, I'm like I can barely make coherent sentences.
Think of it like this way, though. You go out, well, you used to go out to a bar in the evening and chat it up. And that's essentially what these are anyway. So you just have to channel that same energy, I think. And I don't take it as it's not a critical exercise. So I have to treat it more as a social event, I think.
I think that's a really cool way of looking at it. I try and do that with
Yeah.
my interviews and conversations anyways, is to like, if you get into the right mindset, you're more likely to, it doesn't drain you as much if you're like, oh, this is a big formal thing and I need to get all these things right and remember all of it. If you just take it really casually, you end up doing better and probably drains you less. I actually heard of
Now you're making me want to go and get a beer from the fridge.
I had a very interesting podcast session. So there's a podcast called On Being, and the journalist for that podcast is someone called Krista Tippett. She's very, very cool. But in one of her interviews, where someone was interviewing her, they asked her like, how does she open up so intimately with the people she interviews? And she said one of the biggest lessons she's learned is the more tired she is before an interview, the better her performance in the interview is. Because she says when she's tired, she sort of loses all of this worry and stress about it needing to be perfect and it needing to, remember all these questions. She says she can like slip into this casual demeanor way easier, which I thought was really interesting. And she obviously put the caveat of like, don't sleep for 2 hours before an interview to make yourself tired.
Yeah.
The sentiment was more like, don't stress on the way in, and it tends to be better. So super cool. But yeah, so I've before we dive into the interview, I've prepped a list of questions you couldn't prepare for, just to get a better idea of who you are and some insight into you as a person. So the trick is to not think about the answers too much. They are very simple and shouldn't be too strenuous, but just a little bit of an interesting start to meet Jason. But first question is, after a really tiring day, how do you spend your evening?
After a really tiring day, which tends to be almost every day, especially weekends, and the entire blame can be placed on my children. So the thing I do after a really tiring day is I sit down and I code.
Nice.
Yeah. I think a lot of that's because the tiring aspect is very physical, but for me coding, and I think for most people coding is not a very physical activity. It's a mental activity. And I compare it a bit to gaming in that it's an active experience, right? When you're playing computer games, you are actively participating, but people still do it for leisure. So rather than sit down and watch TV, which is more passive, I like to sit down and code a bit. And it also helps me feel like I've gotten on top of things, right? So a tiring day tends to not be very productive either.
Right. Yeah, it's like it's a cool energizing without being draining experience. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what's a really good book that you've read recently?
Oh, I have been super into Philip Pullman's, I think they're called His Dark Materials. It was a trilogy of books that was published, I don't know, in the 90s. I read them when I was a teenager. I reread them last year, and now I've been reading his follow-up trilogy. He hasn't published the third book yet, and I'm almost finished with the second book, which is like a monster 1,000-page book. But they draw me in, and I do really like reading fiction as a way to disconnect from the day-to-day stuff, just to give the imagination a bit of a tickle. I mean, as I alluded to, I don't actually watch any TV, so I tend to be very visceral and in it all the time. And so fiction is a nice way to disconnect. And Philip Pullman is spot on, I think.
I'm adding that to my reading list because I have forgotten about those books, but I've heard a lot about them.
Rereading the originals, I think, is great because, I mean, if you're anything like me, a book 10 years ago, I sort of remember loosely, but reading it again is like the first time I read it. So, yeah.
Cool. And then tea or coffee?
Both. Depends on the time of day. So I would typically start with a cup of coffee, but I definitely drink tea throughout the day, especially at night after dinner. The ritual, we put the kids down at 7. We actually have dinner with them at 5:30, and then I sit down at my computer with a 24-ounce cup of tea, usually licorice or peppermint, and that's the end of my ritual. So coffee in the morning, tea at night.
I was going to ask, how do you take it? But I assume if it's licorice or mint, you normally take it black.
Both. Both my coffee and my tea do not have any substances added to them.
And then what is one invention or app that you wish existed but doesn't?
Gee whiz. I feel fairly satisfied with what's out there. I mean, if there was something, maybe I'd be trying to invent it, but I don't feel like there's any missing aspect of my life that just drives me crazy. Yeah, maybe I would just code it if I could figure it out. Like, well, there are 2 apps I'm thinking of coding, and mostly at the behest of my wife. She wants me to code a gardening app where you can just take simple photos of the plants that you bought with the instructions and have those reminders. And the other one is just a simple wine rating app. And we've tried all the other apps out there, and they're just way too complicated. We just want a simple, like, picture of the wine, put your comments in, would you buy it again or not? But all of them want you to have your social media connections, and your comments are published, and then they're trying to spam you with more purchases. And anyway.
That reminds me of my partner and I have been trying to come up with a movie rating system because we wanted to have our own little like Excel spreadsheet with movies we've watched and rating them. And our V1 of that, we had so many different categories on how to rate the movie. It just got so complicated that the V2 was literally like, did we like it? Would we recommend it? Would we watch it again? And that was it. Like, we just kept it very simple.
Cool.
That reminds me of that wine because it's so complicated sometimes. It's just like, just tell me if it was nice and would you buy it again? It's like all I need.
Yeah. Was it woody?
Yeah.
I guess. I don't know.
But cool. And then what is something you're glad you said no to recently and why?
Slight tangent, but I'm constantly on Hacker News. And I think yesterday I saw an article pop up. It was a blog post of the various different ways that famous techpreneurs would say no. And it was purely hypothetical. Each email was made up. But, they had one from Steve Jobs, one from Elon Musk, and then a few other guys whose names I sort of recognized but didn't. And it did get me thinking about the topic of saying no as an interesting one. And I do find myself in that situation more and more. So I am finding people approach me. Yesterday, I had someone from India approach me asking for funding for a project that he wants to launch in India, creating record studios for artists. And I said no. That's the most recent one I can think of. But it was quite an involved process of saying no in my head. Like, my actual email just said, yeah, thanks, but no. But I was going through, I was like, who do I want to be? Do I want to be Steve Jobs? Do I want to be Andreessen Horowitz? Do I want to be Elon Musk? Who am I going to be? And I just settled with a pretty lame, boring, hey, thanks for the idea, but right now I'm a bit busy. Keep me posted. And that's a roundabout way of answering your question.
Cool. I think that's a brilliant answer. And then last question. What thing that cost you less than 1,000 Rand, which is around $80 or maybe 50 euros, 60, was the best investment most recently?
This microphone I'm using is pretty cool. I can't remember how much that cost, but I think it was under 1,000 Rand. I also purchased a bulk order of wine when the lockdown was lifted in that special territory between lockdowns. And I went on a website where you can buy, something like 12 bottles for 500 Rand. Good investment. I got 3 boxes of that, and we currently still have 30 bottles of wine. So
Brilliant. I think a lot of people are wishing that they had the same idea.
I did it within the first day that lockdown was eased. I actually just went on the site and I was like, 3 times 12. Do it.
Did you see it coming?
And
Were you like, this is coming back?
no. If I had seen it coming, I would have gone and spent another 500 rand on more wine.
Touche.
But I didn't see it coming. We just prepared. I went and restocked up on every bottle of hard liquor that's an essential. Like I got a bottle of bourbon, a bottle of vodka, a bottle of tequila, a bottle of gin, just in case. And it's not even like we use them that often, but I was just thinking, times get tough.
Safe than sorry.
And
Safe than sorry.
it might be until next year that we are under this lockdown, so we'll see.
Touch wood, Jason, but yeah, it could very well be. But cool. Yeah. Thanks for participating. Those are some very interesting answers.
Great, cool interview. I will catch you next time.
Cheers. But yeah, I mean, welcome to the podcast, Jason. It's really cool to have you. Just as a sort of introduction, could you tell me a little bit about SubmitHub? So sort of like, what problem does it address?
I think the root of SubmitHub is easiest to understand if you look at it in the context of the music blog that I also own, which is called Indie Shuffle. So Indie Shuffle was started in 2008, 2009 at the peak of illegal MP3 downloading. And people used to go to music blogs to discover music and also be able to download it really easily. So from that period of about 2008, 2009 until 2013 or 14, music blogs were it. If you wrote a music blog, not only were you super cool, but you were probably also super influential. And a lot of people in the music industry knew that. So there was a big business built around pitching to music blogs. And I wasn't unique. There were 1,000 plus music blogs across the different genres of music. There were heavy metal music blogs. There were techno music blogs. There were indie music blogs. And we kind of bridged a lot of those genres. But one thing that was consistent for all of us bloggers was that every day we'd wake up to 20, 30, 40, 50, 300 emails from publicists, record labels, and artists themselves, all pitching their new music and saying, hey, check me out. I released a song this week. Is there any way you can blog about it? And it became an essential part of any musician's launch process, right? What do you do? Step one, you got your song. Cool. Make sure it's distributed on all the platforms. Get it uploaded to SoundCloud, YouTube, Spotify, etc. Okay, how do I get listeners? Well, you got to pitch the blogs. Okay, how do I pitch the blogs? Well, here's a spreadsheet with 3,000 emails. Just copy them all, put them in BCC, and send. And the end result was that for me as a blogger, my inbox became unusable. I kind of just trashed it. And it also meant that for those artists, the music bloggers weren't actually listening to them anymore. And so a lot of the content that we were covering and promoting and pushing was from acts that you already knew and that we already knew. It was the acts we had discovered back in 2008, 2009, when music blogging was fresh and cool. And by 2013, we couldn't pay attention to the new stuff anymore because it was too overwhelming. We were getting smashed from every side. It was inconsistent. Like someone would send, here's a zip file. Oh, here's my Dropbox. Here's a SoundCloud link. Here's a YouTube link. Here's, I've generated a puzzle, interactive. You have to connect all the different dots and then the song will play. And you're like, whoa, leave me alone. And it also meant that artists weren't being listened to, and that sucked. So double-edged sword, right? As blogs, our passion, our goal, and the reason we got a following in the first place was because we were so good at finding new stuff. And by 2013, 2014, blogs were regurgitating the same stuff over and over. New Tame Impala, whoop-de-doo, everyone jump on it, right? And so when 2015 rolled around, I decided I was going to try and solve that problem. And I needed to solve the problem for 2 reasons. Number 1, my inbox was unmanageable and I wasn't discovering music. And number 2, I was in danger of going broke. So number 2 was because blogs in general, not just music blogs, but blogs, by the time 2015 had rolled around, the writing was essentially on the wall that advertising revenue was drying up. Traffic was drying up. It was all being gobbled up by Facebook, and Facebook. A little bit of Google, a little bit of that. And in the music industry, also Spotify, right? Spotify started in Sweden, but by 2014 or 2015, they launched in the States. I think they arrived in South Africa in 2017, 2018, something like that. And so as a music blogger, the writing was on the wall that I could keep doing it as a passion, but to have it be my sole source of income was going to be a pretty bad idea. So end of 2015, I decided this is all or nothing. I have to create a new viable project that's going to keep me afloat and means that I don't have to go back and work for a big corporation doing a job that I don't really feel passionate about. So SubmitHub was launched at the end of 2015 as a very simple form. It had a few fields that musicians could fill out: artist name, song title, and then you paste a link to your song. You could either use YouTube or SoundCloud, and I chose those two because they had really open APIs, and I was able to take either the SoundCloud source or the YouTube source, and then just with a little bit of front-end JavaScript, bring that together as a unified player on this website. And so it didn't matter if you sent me one or the other. It all came through in a consistent feed, consistent format, and I just had this nice list of songs with a thumb up button and a thumb down button. And a thumb up meant I like it, I'm going to blog it. Thumb down meant I don't like it. I hooked up a little bit of code so that they would get notified of my decision. And that was it. It was super simple. And the last piece was setting up an autoresponder on my email that just said, hey, I'm not going to read your email, but if you want to fill out this form on submithub.com, go for it. And within the first week, I had taken those 300 emails per day and just channeled them into probably 20 or 30 submissions per day out the gate. So that was kind of cool and pretty exciting. And it showed me that this thing might have legs, right? So this was November of 2015, which means I probably started coding it in September of 2015, maybe August. So it's been about 5 years. We're approaching 5 years.
And where are you now as, like, in terms of users and reach and size, where are you now as a company?
Well, if you look at our Alexa rank,
Ooh.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Alexa rank, but it's a company owned by Amazon, and they do this comparative ranking of websites. So rather than try to estimate your traffic, which comes up horrendously wrong,
Right.
they are constantly estimating everyone's traffic and just ranking them. So if you take a look at SubmitHub's rank, I think we've now cracked into the top 20,000 websites in the world,
Ooh.
which is cool. That's the biggest website I've ever owned. I think Indie Shuffle managed to hit like top 50,000 at its peak. We're now at 200,000, but I think SubmitHub's got quite a bit more room to grow. We're doing about 10,000 unique registered users per day logging in, and that also I think breaks down to something like 75 to 80,000 unique visits per day, and then the time on site is something like half an hour. So a lot of people are addicted to it. Let's just put it that way, and not unintentionally so. I myself am addicted to it, and I mean I don't have any social media accounts that I monitor anymore, but I've got SubmitHub, and it's got these chat rooms in it, so everyone's active in it. Artists can chat with each other, bloggers can chat with each other, record labels can chat with each other. So there's a constant flow of content going on there. Not to mention that if you are a curator, every time you log in, you've got a whole stream of new songs to listen to, and you get paid to listen to them. We haven't even gotten into that part. But yeah, we're doing at least 10,000 unique registered accounts per day visiting.
And that's like 10,000 fewer emails in your inbox per day. So,
oh, well, that's the irony of ironies, right? I built a software to get rid of email submissions, and now as the CEO of said company, my email inbox is full of emails. But that's a different email address, so different problem, right?
Yeah, I mean, you could
one which I have actually been working really hard to solve and have made some great headway in. So
can you divulge some of that information, or is that your next company?
No, that's still the same company. But what I've done now for the last few months is worked on a sort of in-house tasks system for SubmitHub, where my team and I have identified repetitive activities that would come through on email, and we've actually converted them into these tasks that are created on the website and have everything available right there. So we can boil the whole activity down into kind of one or two buttons. Task comes through, yes or no, done. And you've got all the information you want at your fingertips. An example being, so the idea, the concept behind SubmitHub is that you've got lots of indie shuffles, right? We've got about 1,500 of them now. Music blogs, Spotify playlisters, YouTube channels, who sign up to receive this music from artists. And they can't just sign up, they have to apply, and then they go through a process of review, and we make a decision. So that's an example where we were getting about 50 to 60 applications per day, each of them coming through on email. And those emails wouldn't have the full story involved in it. You'd have to sort of open up their profile on SubmitHub to kind of look at some of the statistics that I had loaded in the background. And so converting all of that into these tasks has taken an activity that was probably taking up 5 or 6 hours per day and boiled it down to probably about 20 minutes. It's pretty dope.
That is pretty damn cool.
Yeah. So that's kind of a cool system that we've been working on, and we've applied that to multiple different tasks. So it's not just the applications. There's all sorts of things that happen on SubmitHub, be they policing activities or requests. And my big next step is to take this same system and turn it into a customer support ticket system, so that anyone, and this is where it gets really cool. So it's going to be a customer support system. Anyone can open up a ticket with a question, but rather than those questions having to be answered by the SubmitHub team, it can be crowdsourced so that anyone on SubmitHub can actually answer those questions and earn money for it.
Ooh, so you don't even have to wait for a response time. Anyone who's available to answer that.
Customer support from people who are, as I mentioned, I'm addicted. I'm not the only one who's addicted to the site. There are a lot of people who have been using it for years now and have a lot of knowledge. So we're going to appoint a select few, maybe 10 people scattered throughout the world and have them on this system monitoring the customer support tickets so that they come in. And then if they get stuck, they can escalate it to an admin. But yeah, so that's kind of that's
super,
thing I've been coding now.
Super cool. And something which I don't know if we've mentioned explicitly yet, but you are not only the sort of like CEO of SubmitHub, you're also the only developer at your company, or a solo developer. Could you tell me a little bit more about like what is your joint developer CEO role look like at this point in your company's life cycle? Like what does the normal day to day look like for you, if you have a normal day to day?
Well, there's the normal day to day that I want, and I'll give you the normal day to day currently.
Cool.
So the normal day to day is I wake up in the morning, and while the kids are having their milk, I answer as many emails as I can, and I'm usually able to get through almost all of my emails within half an hour. I would say there's usually 20 to 30 customer requests that I wake up to in the morning, smash those all out. And then because we're on the South African time zone, things stay relatively quiet throughout the morning and the early afternoon. All of America is still asleep. All of Europe is still waking up, and they're enjoying the fact that America's still asleep. So I tend to not get very many emails from 7 a.m. until 3 p.m. It's pretty quiet. So that time tends to get carved out for coding. During that, I'll try to tackle as many different items as I can. I think I've got 42 of them on my to-do list now, and every day I add 5 or 10 more and then try to knock off more than that. That's the game. I make a positive gain every day. But that window from 8:30 until 4:30, that's usually when I get some time to code, with a lunch break and playing with the kids a little bit. Then everything shuts down for 3 hours. The nanny leaves. We cook dinner, we wash the kids, we read them stories, we put them to sleep. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I get back to the computer, and that's where I want to be able to code. But inevitably what's happened is more customer support tickets have rolled in. And then I need to spend a little bit of time browsing Reddit just to let some steam off, do a little bit of that passive consumption. And probably around 8:30 or 9, I get a second wind and I do another hour and a half of coding, and then that's it. That's the day currently. So I mean, I don't feel like I'm very CEO. It's a small company. There's 5 of us right now. And so a lot of the tasks that we have to deal with, it's mostly just customer support. I'm not sitting there with like big board meetings trying to get through things, and but lawyers are knocking on my desk and shit like that. It's cool. It's easy. And so ultimately my goal is to just be able to eliminate most of that customer support and be able to sit down every day and just code and work on things I want to work on, rather than constantly trying to chase other little bugs and feature requests like that.
Yeah.
So
I guess, I mean, it's, as you said, I don't think as a small team you have certain luxuries that like a CEO at a massive company probably wouldn't. But I still think maybe I'm wrong, so please correct me if that's the case. But like there is some context switching involved. Like emailing and coding requires a different, like coming from a different place sort of. But having that split where you've got the morning and the beginning of the afternoon to code because of the time difference, and that is your dedicated time, that probably helps quite a lot. Like if you were switching between emails and coding throughout the day, you'd probably have to sort of get back into the swing of things each time. So having that split probably helps. And I think your
it helps big time.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't find it difficult to switch between the two, whether it's customer support, coding, doing the financial stuff, trying to think of product strategy, whatever. Each of those independently are cool, but I think you're right to point out that you got to get in a groove, right? And if I'm here coding, trying to knock out a bunch of to-do list items, and I constantly have to switch back and forth every half hour, it does slow things down and it's harder to focus. So I think a lot of coders will relate to there almost being 2 types of coding. The one is where you're constantly just trying to fix bugs and deal with customer requests and stuff like that. And then there's the other one where you're creating something new, and that moves a lot faster, for me at least, right? So I go, okay, I'm going to sit down and I want to code this new feature. And that's just this constant boom, 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 boom. It's a lot more fun. I really don't enjoy diving into old code that much. I don't think there are many people who do. A lot of the time, folks just end up refactoring all of it when they see it. They're like, who the hell wrote this? Oh, man, it was me. I wrote this. Oh, God. What was I thinking? I should have been doing it this way. But so, I mean, you learn stuff over time. And it's a dangerous trap to get pulled into when you open up your old code and you're like, I need to rewrite this. You don't need to rewrite it. If it still works, just leave it, right? And so for me, that's the worst type of coding. The best type of coding is developing a new feature, a new product, building something out. And so I end up working a lot more on UI and UX stuff. And I think that's really cool because not only is it fun to work on, but people actually see it and they respond to it often. So when you roll out a change, like, wow, all the album artwork, it should be circles instead of squares. You do that, and then you roll it out, and everyone's like, whoa, dope. Did everyone see the circles? And that's why the chat rooms are actually really cool, because you get that feedback, which is really important, I think, as a developer, to actually see the positive impact of your work. So you do something, people respond to it. Negative impact too. I mean, that definitely happens, but
both kinds of feedback are incredibly useful to have. So just opening up that channel makes a lot of difference. Yeah.
I don't know how early you were on Facebook. I mean, I'll be super cool. I was on there in 2004. And the coolest part about it was how quickly it evolved at that time. So when I was first on there, they had your Facebook wall was a text document that anyone could write on, and you could erase everyone else's content and write your own. I had a little revision history on it. But the speed at which it evolved was really awesome. And I think users love to see that, to log into a website that they visit all the time and see new features, new designs, that type of stuff that they can interact with and engage with. And I think once websites just become the same boring thing over and over, it becomes stagnant. Like I haven't logged into Facebook in 4 years, and I have a feeling that if I do log in now, it's going to look the same. That's it. So that's why I think some of that UI UX stuff is the most interesting.
That touches on something that I wanted to ask you about, because I think we spoke about this last time as well. One of the things that being the only developer enables you to do is you get to work on things incredibly quickly. There's no like weeks of planning or like having to have stakeholder meetings. You can sort of pick a feature, work on it, and ship it. There's like that process from start to finish is way faster for you. What are some of the challenges that come with that setup? Because I think like that's every developer's dream, but like I can't think of any developer who would say, no, I'd love to work on something for many weeks instead of getting it out really quickly. But what are some of the challenges that you found with that setup?
I like the phrase launch fast and iterate, and that's sort of the way I operate. And I think that's what you hit on there. When I'm coding things, I rush through it, and I don't mess up too often, but I think that's one of the biggest potential downsides of doing it is that I don't have a QA. Is that the right word? A QA?
Yeah.
Someone who checks my code? That doesn't exist. And oftentimes I'll roll things out and go, oh shit, I think I need to stay up for another hour. And my wife was asking, are you coming to bed? I'm like, no, I just messed something up. So one of the lessons I learned early on as an individual coder is don't roll out new code before going to sleep.
Cool. I think I can see.
I learned that lesson and I kept on doing it for years. But at this point, I've now finally made the decision to not do it because sometimes you get so excited, right? You create this new code, you're ready to launch it out to the world. It's 10 p.m. So you do it and then, oh man, there was a bug. And oftentimes, I would just go to sleep and wake up in the morning and go, oh my God, what have I done? Right. So I think that's one of the harder parts of being a solo dev is that there aren't people checking your work to make sure that you're doing it right. The other thing, no, man, there aren't many downsides to it. Look, I mean, one is that you become the bottleneck, right? So if there's new features that need to get rolled out, they don't just magically happen in the background. And I've definitely outsourced code in the past, especially with Indie Shuffle, and I'm still actually outsourcing. Like I built Indie Shuffle's mobile apps on React Native, and then SubmitHub became sort of too big to ignore. And so I hired one of the guys who wrote one of the libraries that I used on the React Native app to just take over my app. So he's working on that in the background, and it is really cool to have the code write itself in a way. I say it'd be really cool if it does this, and then a week later it's there. But it's also that took a week or two. I don't know what's going on, and so that instant gratification disappears when you have teams. All of this is to say, I don't really think there are that many downsides, except for the bottlenecking and maybe the fact that you can make mistakes a bit easier. But otherwise, I can sit down and envision a whole product in my head and just flow code. Flow code? I'll just use that term.
We're coining it. You heard it here first.
Yeah, okay, I've never even thought of it. But my experience with teams, the very first version of the Indie Shuffle app for iOS and Android, which we did in 2014, I went and I hired a team up in Calgary in Canada. And I went up there and I spent the week with them. And holy Moses, did that take a long time. I mean, like team meetings, got to plan out every screen, do the functionality, work through it. And then I went through that whole process again. I did a reboot of Indie Shuffle and I hired a team in Bangladesh and I had, 8 developers working for me. And this was actually all how I learned to code because I didn't actually know how to code when I was doing this. I learned through the process of being involved in those teams and having to fix things and some of those frustrations of thinking, man, this is taking forever. Rather than tell you guys to move this button over here, I'm just going to do it. I just move the button. I'm done. That took me 5 minutes. What the hell is going on? So I think the team stuff to me is really frustrating, and it's a piece of the puzzle that I struggle with because ultimately, SubmitHub is going to be dependent on me until I can solve that problem. As the solo dev, it stops with me, right? I'm the bottleneck, and so that doesn't bother me much in day to day. But I would say that's probably the biggest downside. And the upsides way outweigh the downsides. But the biggest downside right now is that I can't sell the company without selling myself. if something happens to me, the company's kind of done. I mean, those are the big downsides. And so eventually I'm going to have to cross this scary bridge of passing the torch and bringing other people in. And they're obviously going to look at my code and go, what the fuck is this? We have to refactor everything. But I think that's just the life of any coder who opens up someone else's code.
Yeah.
So
and just on the point of like planning, because I think that's your experience with the team in Canada, where it took so long to get this thing, or even just like moving a button, you can do it in 5 minutes. What does your planning look like? Like as a solo dev, what is your current setup for planning something before you start building? Like, do you literally just jump straight in? Do you have some sort of sketch? Do you brainstorm it with the rest of your team just so they're aware? Like, what are some of the ways in which you set yourself up before you start coding so that you sort of have a direction?
I literally just jump in. I mean, I'll give you the example of the tasks that I mentioned earlier, because that's the most recent big project I've had to execute. The problem statement was simple. We want to take the application emails away from email and put them on the side. And I've been doing them for 4.5 years, so I sort of know what the process is. The application comes in, we review it, we look for certain things. If those things look okay, we say yes. That's it. That was my plan. That's all I needed to know. And so from there, I just started coding it together. I go, okay, well, application comes in. So first thing I have to do is create a task. Great. Now I've done it. And that's basically just a useless piece of thing there. But this task probably needs some easy links to more information. So let me put those in there. Okay, cool. That's in there. Now we need action buttons. Either like I approve it, or I decline it, or I want to chat. And then I go, okay, well, shit, if we're doing chats, right now SubmitHub has person-to-person chats, but I should probably code group chats, but that shouldn't be too hard. So then I go ahead and I just throw together group chats, and now I can hook those up to the tasks so that when you have a question, you create the group task, you talk. So I mean, that's sort of the process that goes through my head, and it definitely has very little pre-planning that goes into it. I just launch and I go, because to me, the high-hanging fruit, the things that have to get done, are so obvious and so easy that I would rather worry about the nitty-gritty when I get there. And I think that's where a lot of people do get stuck in teamwork, is that, and take this as someone who has limited coding teamwork experience, but from what I've seen, you're trying to solve every corner case before you've even started writing your code. So you sit down and you think about every possible outcome that could happen here, all the functions you need, and you end up creating this app that can do everything at once without, it takes you a month. And you could have just had that core function of application comes in, here's the info to review, yes or no, and you're done. And so for me, what I did was I went with the core underlying stuff, picked up a few corner cases as I was coding it. And I just thought, oh yeah, I should do this if this happens. And then I launched it, and I threw it in front of my team, and I said, here it is, good luck. And then they start going through it, and they go, I always do this as part of my process. Can you do this? I'm like, cool, yeah, sure. Let me code that. Boom. Oh, hey, this button doesn't seem to work. Yeah, you're right. Oh, shoot. Yeah, let me fix that button. And so it's that launch and iterate mentality of, look, the core function works. So why are we holding back on that? Let's just get that out now, and then I'll tweak everything as we go. And that's been the ethos of how I've developed SubmitHub from the very get-go. The very first iteration I gave you the example of, which was a form with, artist name, song title, and a link to the song, was so simple, right? And that was it. And I could have sat there and thought about all the different things, like, that maybe they want to add a press kit or some photos or their social media or their lyrics or all this type of stuff, but I didn't. I just went for it. And I think that's what makes a big difference. Rather than sitting down and thinking about it, you create your MVP. And if you keep that mentality, not just with your overall platform, but each subset of it, create your MVP, launch it, and then go from there, rather than trying to build your product in full. So I think that's my style. It's one of the coolest things that I can do as a solo dev. And with my team, Dylan is sort of my right-hand man with managing a lot of the stuff. We've got 2 other great employees who he's helping manage, and then Henk, who's helping with finances and the legal. But with Dylan, I'll often say, hey, I'm thinking of coding this. And then he starts to sort of spit out his ideas, and God bless him because he's totally right. But even though he's right, I just want to be like, dude, shut up. Shut up.
Too much.
I,
Too much. Too
don't
much.
don't give me all these details right now. Don't just let me code the MVP and then come back to me with the
Yeah.
details. And
Do you store those ideas somewhere? Because I'm sure like some of those like brainwaves you have, you're like, oh, this might be good to explore later on. Do you like store those, or do you just sort of hope that they come back, or trust that they will come back if they're really good?
I use Todoist, which is a task application management system. I mean, they're a dime a dozen at this point because pretty much every developer to-do tutorial is how to set up a to-do list. And the platform is really nice. It's just got a Chrome extension. I can add a task very easily and put them into different projects. So I do have a wish list category where I kind of stash ideas that I've had that I think, hey, that'd be cool one day, but is of no importance. Well, there's no pressure behind it,
Yeah.
so to speak.
And do you revisit those like regularly, or do you just
No.
happen onto it every so often?
No, I should go look at it.
Cool. Well, check out SubmitHub for new changes coming soon. Maybe Jason finds something cool.
SubmitHub updates daily, so that one's still cool. But the wish list stuff, some of it, when I do dust it off after a couple months, I mostly end up just deleting things, being like, that's a stupid idea.
Yeah. That's probably still quite a helpful process, though. It's like a cleansing to go down that wish list and say, oh yeah, I did think of that, or maybe it's evolved by now.
More often than not, it's that it
Yeah.
has evolved. I mean, one idea at some point was to set up a bit of a SubmitHub marketplace where people can actually go pay for services. So the context there is that in the music industry, there's something called payola, where you can pay someone money and they will play your song. And that was actually made illegal in the US starting in the 1950s. And I think most civilized countries, probably including South Africa, have rules against payola on radio. But a lot of the digital streaming hasn't caught up to those rules. And Spotify, for example, it's against their terms of service to accept money for placement in your playlist. So if someone comes along and says, here's $20, can you put my song in your playlist? You're supposed to say no. And we don't want to be associated with anyone who would say yes. We actually have a strict policy against it. It should be about the music first and foremost. But I did debate creating a marketplace for services like TikTok and Instagram, where that sort of payola mentality is more accepted because the context is slightly different. For example, on TikTok, you're often creating videos, and those videos take time to do. And so a TikTok person would say, it's $20 or $30 for me to do the video for you. So I've debated making a marketplace for that, and that's sitting in my wish list. It might happen, but it hasn't yet.
And it is like if you've revisited one day and you see that there's a chance to make it, you probably will. But as long as it's not part of your MVP.
Well, our main competitor just did it.
Ooh.
Actually, they launched it. But they're not doing it nicely, in my opinion. So.
But I wanted to touch on something you said last time we spoke, and I really like the way you phrased it. It's on this idea of like launch fast and iterate. Is that your users they'll forget the little mistakes. Like the week after they see it, it's gone out of their memory. They'll just be like, thanks so much for fixing it. And then that's like the end of it. Could you just touch on that?
Yeah, they often
that
thank
part
you
as
for
well?
fixing things that you broke in the first place, which I often find sad. It's not sad for them. I feel bad about it. Let's put it that way. When someone's like, "Oh, thanks for fixing that so quickly," and all I can think is, no, dude, it's my fault for breaking that. Like, you should be mad at me, but you're thanking me. I broke it. So I kind of find that funny. But yeah, as you point out, what I've learned over the years is that people forget, even if the worst of worst happens and your website goes down, they forget. They forget. Even when Amazon or Google or all of these have service interruptions, I think Cloudflare had a multi-hour outage last week. I mean, that's got more dire consequences. But at the end of the day, a year from now, it's going to have a minimal impact, right?
Yeah.
They'll have a few blog posts about how they've did their post-operation analysis and blah blah blah. I mean, I guess to be fair, they might actually end up losing tens of millions of dollars in potential revenue to Amazon or someone more dependable. But for a service like mine, which is what will be the case in 99.9% of sort of SaaS businesses. Like you're big, but you're not big enough. People forget.
Yeah.
They forget.
And I mean,
They love to see change, though. They really do. I love to see change. Maybe I'm just channeling that through them, but I think people really love to see, like, whoa, you changed the button.
Is that also
Yeah.
sort of one of your like guiding principles, is just to try and like keep changes coming in and keep updating?
Yeah, I think it's important. I find that when I get lost in some of the back end stuff that the front end users don't notice. And when I use the word back end, I just mean under the hood. Let's put it that way. The under the hood stuff, right? They don't notice it. It's important for the website, but I get this feeling from users, there's slight murmurations of like, wow, things seem to have slowed down, or whatever happened to that feature that we requested so long ago? And they don't notice that. So I think it is important to keep people actively on there as if something new is happening and there's new features and new stuff like that. So I would say yes, it's an underlying principle of the way I develop.
I can imagine that if you're not careful, you run the risk of just adding features for the sake of change. How would you think about that? Because I'm just trying to picture, like, if I were just to like think, oh, I need to change, let me build this feature. I don't necessarily think it's the best one to build right now, but it means the front end will change a bit. How would you think about that?
That probably means you have a complete product. I guess I don't have that problem because the product's still evolving. But I mean, I'll give you a fun example of one I rolled out yesterday just for fun, which was highlighting the words as you search. So if you were to go to submithub.com/blog and you search for the word indie, it's going to highlight all the text with a little mark tag to have it highlighted. I mean, that's just a cool little tiny feature that I guess, was it necessary? Nah, but it's sort of helpful. On the flip side, Indie Shuffle hasn't evolved very much since SubmitHub was launched. So I don't know if that is kind of going stale. I mean, we're definitely losing users. We're not as big as we used to be. I think Indie Shuffle still manages to pull something like 10,000 users a day, which is cool. But I can see a potential risk for that. The thing with SubmitHub is that it's quite broad in its feature set. So there's submitting to curators that exists, but there's also a function called Hot or Not, which allows artists to rate each other's music, and that's doing something around 10,000 votes per day. There's the chat rooms. So there's this endless stream of things that can be tweaked and improved that aren't necessarily just a waste or added feature or bloat, so to speak. And almost every tweak I do make tends to come from the user themselves. So everything I'm coding is to meet the requirements of users and the way they interact with the website, if that makes sense. So yes, I think you're right, there's a risk, but I'm not there yet.
So, I mean, just to contextualize, what I think is really interesting about some of the stuff you said now is, like, because you don't have that like team of QA engineers who sort of go through all your code, by launching fast and iterating, you're really relying on your user base to tell you what they need more of, whether the thing that you shipped works, whether it doesn't. And they sort of become a crucial feedback loop. Like, as a solo developer, that is like your main source of, is this thing good? Like, is this a thumbs up or a thumbs down, to use your little like rating system?
Yeah.
And that I can imagine that user feedback in that sense is incredibly valuable, which is why you have that chat sort of
the chat rooms
functionality in there
are
as well.
big for that. And when I launch bigger things, I'll often sort of announce in the chat rooms, hey, if anyone spots anything funky, let me know. And they do, if there is. I mean, obviously my code's almost perfect, so it's rare, but no, I mean, they point it out. The users are really good at telling you when things don't work. And sometimes it's annoying, but they're really good at it. Yeah.
And do you have a method for like looking for ideas within the chat rooms from your user base? Like, do you have a search, or do you have keywords that sort of flag when new ideas pop up? Do you have a way?
I'm there. I think that's, at this point, possibly one of the issues. We alluded to earlier the distraction of switching between coding and doing something else.
Yeah.
And that is actually a big distraction for me, is that I probably check the chat rooms once every 2 hours at least. I'll probably do that after we're done here. Just go check, see if anyone said anything that needs to get shadow banned or stuff like that. And they're not that busy that I can't keep up. So, and they're public. Anyone can go take a look at them right now. Not all of them, actually. The bloggers chat room's private. But yeah, in general, I'm able to keep on top of it without having to automate that in any way. I have debated creating a feature request page, and I might actually end up doing that. And that would be a really good step in the direction of disconnecting myself from the distraction of the chat rooms. On the flip side, it's kind of sad to do that, because I think something that a lot of the users really like is the ability to interact directly with the person writing the code for the website, and to see that direct and positive impact from it. I think that makes a big difference.
I was going to say, I have a feeling that some of the ideas, when they come up organically, are more useful than if they are like formally submitted via a request form. Like, it's something changes in the kinds of features people ask for.
Yeah, and I mean, it's cool. The chat rooms have, upvotes and downvotes, and if someone suggests something, oftentimes people will, give it a thumb up, or I use that as a gauge. If someone's made a
Right.
suggestion or asked for a feature or suggested something that could work smoother, and it's got 10 thumb ups next to it, then maybe I should look into it.
And then, just as a closing sort of question, what has been one of the most surprising things that you've learned being a solo developer?
I'm really hard to surprise. Yeah. Maybe that's one of the things, though. As a coder, to be successful, you need to be able to be good at anticipating things, thinking in advance, and sort of being a few steps ahead. It's almost like playing chess, although most of us won't play chess these days because it's too boring. But it is a bit like that, right? You have to constantly be sort of playing out the different scenarios that might be happening. And so for me, I would say that there's actually not too much surprise, because I kind of I saw it coming, right? Um, One thing that people often have mentioned in the past is the difficulty of scaling and the need to grow your team and do all of that. And I suppose it's not that surprising, but it is kind of cool to look back now at 5 years of this, and kind of say, no, you didn't need it. It wasn't necessary. I didn't have to have a team of 40 people at this point running the company. We're still cool the way we are. We've got 5 employees, and we're not gonna grow much more. Up until March, we were just 3 employees, so we've already grown significantly, and that we'll probably stop there. So I don't know if that's a surprise. Nah, I haven't been surprised.
Just on that, out of curiosity, is there a sort of like a breaking point or a trigger event where you will have to grow your dev team to more than one? Is there like something that would cause that to happen, or is that not even like on the cards yet?
So I think it's inevitable, but it is probably going to be 100% driven by my desire to tap out. I think that's ultimately it. I enjoy coding a lot right now. It's not the annoying part of the job. As I mentioned, there are annoying parts to coding, but it can't all be fun. So I suppose maybe I could bring on a dev to fix all of that, but then they're just constantly digging through my stupid code, and that sucks too. I think ultimately, if I want to sell the company, which is probably the end game, it's not something I think maybe it will happen, right? I mean, not everyone's, but I mean, I imagine for a lot of people, the dream is to like work your butt off, have success, and then just tap out as soon as you can, and just be able to garden or play music or paint or sit in the sun or do whatever you want, play tennis. And I, as a human, desire that too. So if I have the opportunity to do it, I'm gonna do it. And I think that's right now where I would need to pass the torch on from a development standpoint, because no one's going to come along and want to buy SubmitHub or invest heavily in it if I am the only point of contact for this. Again, I don't actually know how true that is either, because there's another company called DistroKid right now, which is probably the most successful music distribution company out there. So artists pay DistroKid, you like upload your MP3 and they'll put it on every platform for you. Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Tidal, YouTube, SoundCloud, blah, 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 blah. So they're called a distributor. And as I understand it, they've only got one developer. He's the CEO and he sold the company. But some of that would bug me too, because now you're actually reporting to someone else and you no longer just get to sit down and code what you want to and go, all right, cool, well, what am I going to work on today? Or maybe you do. Maybe that's in the terms of your agreement. But at the end of the day, you're now beholden to someone else.
Yeah.
So I think if I do sell,
yeah,
I'm going to sell without myself there. I have to package up the company and sell it nicely. So we're on we got, I think, 4.5 years until we hit sort of a structuring event with our setup in the States, at which point it would actually be quite tax beneficial to sell. And so loosely in the back of my head, I'm kind of using that. We would actually pay no tax. It's God bless America. But I think that's sort of the loose timeline that we're working on. The goal is to have the company be completely self-sufficient without me, or without anyone else for that matter by that time. And what I mean by that is that there should be no key stakeholder in the company that would cause the company to fall apart if they left, myself included.
Yeah.
So I think that's the goal.
Yeah.
And for me, that is when I would have to pass the torch over completely to other developers. And obviously that means that I need to start thinking about it sooner rather than later. But because it's a 4.5 year time window that's left on this event, I'm not rushing.
Right. Yeah. Just on something you said about, just because this has been on my mind for a while now, because I've had quite a few conversations with people, but this idea of like working your butt off to like, you know, retire or tap out of the game as early as possible and be able to play tennis or garden or whatever. Isn't it sad that that is what we think we can only really enjoy life by retiring early? Like, surely we should be able to enjoy all of that throughout, like up until the point you retire. You shouldn't have to work in a job you hate just to get enough retirement to be able to enjoy life after 65. I mean, that's sad.
Yeah, it's a bummer. I'm already blessed as the owner of my own business.
I was going to say, like, the ideal is that you get to do what you love every day and feel like you are, like, you can wake up saying, oh, I'm so excited to have fun again.
Or I'm just going to do nothing.
As opposed to think like, or that.
And no one's going to notice. And I do actually encourage that with my team as well. I mean, if you don't want to work today, don't work. But get your work done. Type of thing.
But then take responsibility for it. You are the owner.
Do you know what it is more? It's the responsibility, I think, actually, that still brings me down in a way. That's the downside of it. It's waking up in the morning to an email from someone demanding a refund. It's not the code. That part's fun. If I were retired, I'd still want to sit down and like build this wine app and build this gardening app and do that type of stuff. But it's the pissed off people. It's the, hey, can you do this for me? Hey, can you do that? I think most people don't enjoy that part of their work. I mean, that kind of sucks from a corporate standpoint. I worked for Google for a few years, which was the coolest job you could ever have in a corporation. And you would think it's almost everyone's dream, but it still has those terrible moments of performance reviews, workplace politics, the fact that you're responsible and you have to do stuff and you're thinking, what purpose does this have anyway in the meaning of life or me? Or like, why am I getting a phone call on Saturday afternoon to send an email to someone? Why? And so I think for me, it's less about not having the work anymore. It's more about that responsibility. And so I imagine for a lot of us, it's actually getting rid of that because, I mean, I look at my parents now, they are heading into retirement. They're in the 65, 66. My dad kind of knows what he wants to do when he retires, but my mom's like, what do I do after work? She doesn't know. She's trying to figure it out, but and mom, if you're listening, sorry, maybe you have it figured out and maybe I'm just wrong. But I think that is a bit of a difficulty for people. So for me, it's less about working my ass off so that I can tap out, because to be fair, I don't actually have that much pressure in the workplace because I set the tasks and whatnot. I think it's just getting rid of the shitty customer email support tickets that can come in, or just those little stressful moments where you wonder why you're stressing out over it in the big scheme. And people can be mean. I mean, we're all capable of it, of being mean, and we all have our cranky days. But geez, when you open it up to the internet, some people are just total dicks. And there's this restraint that you have to show because the customer is always right. And sometimes you just want to flip the bird and tell them where to go. But you can't. And those are some of the harder moments, swallowing that and just going, okay, I'm going to do this. So for me, the tapping out is less about I'm going to work my ass off until I get there because I'm not that stressed. The kids are definitely more work than SubmitHub. To all the other dads out there, yeah. I don't know.
Well, Jason, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your adventure with SubmitHub as a solo developer. It was so much fun chatting to you. I had loads of I had a great time.
Me too. It's pretty good.
If people want to follow you online or they want to touch base with you, what is the best way to reach you?
So I've been really into pigeon carrier mail lately, and I'm not sure if that's going to work so well for international travel, but if you're in Cape Town and if you want to launch a pigeon, otherwise you can just email me at jason@submithub.com. That's the easiest way. I don't have a Twitter personality, or I haven't logged into Facebook for 4 years. Jason@submithub.com is good. Or you can find me in the SubmitHub chat rooms as well.
I was going to say, otherwise they can just lurk for a bit and see you pop up every so often and have a word with you there. Yep. Awesome, dude. Thanks so much. I hope we get to chat again soon. Keep safe during lockdown and COVID. And
maybe we'll get a beer when we're allowed out of our houses.
Yes, that sounds fantastic. I'm very much looking forward to that day. I think we all are.